stepped off the private jet into a cold wind. His trip across the country is over for now, and this would be his last trip. At 70 he was headed into a board meeting to officially inform the board of his retirement and nominate his replacement as CEO of the company. As he rode into the city, his mind wandered back to the events leading up to his divorce in that same city almost 40 years before. At that time, he was a young recent graduate of Harvard and had joined this company right out of school. He met Mia at a work function. He later learned Mia had crashed the party but had instantly fallen in love with her. Her giggle was infectious and being with her was so easy. Over the objections of his parents, the man had asked Mia to be his wife, and they married about a month later. Mia was a stunning strawberry blonde that kept her hair cropped close. While her hair was short, it still had a feminine side to it. The man's driver told him some street construction was going to force them to take a detour that will add several minutes to the commute to the company headquarters. He told him the meetings would not start until his arrival, so just get him to the building ASAP. His mind went back to those early days with Mia. He was a rising star in the company and had already earned several raises as well as a great Christmas bonus. He also discovered that Mia was a fantastic cook and seemed to love to cook. Mia was such a fantastic wife that in the early days of their marriage, he not being her first bed partner did not bother him. Mia said it happened when she was in high school, and the guy did not mean anything to her. Then Mia started to get distant. Several times a week his dinner was not ready when he got home. The man remembered he made a mental note to see what was wrong with Mia and what he could do to fix it. Mia was from a small town about 2 hours from the city. The couple would drive up there almost every other weekend. Mia enjoyed those trips, and it did the man good to see her smile. The man would sit with her dad enjoying a beer while Mia and her mom would go shopping. The man smiled as he remembered having thoughts of how good life was. Their first year of marriage passed and the man surprised Mia with a first anniversary party. The man's smile turned into a frown as he thought this would be their last happy anniversary. One day the man came home to find Mia crying. He attempted to comfort her, but she rebuffed his efforts, so he walked into the kitchen and got a beer and walked to his desk and went through the mail. That night before bed Mia said she was sorry, but it was that time of the month, and she was just in a bad mood. Then over time Mia had developed a habit of not being where she was supposed to be. Then later learned Mia had left the city and was staying with her parents. That night the man decided to go sit with some friends and play some pool and enjoy each other's company. The whole time he had the feeling something bad was about to happen. After almost 6 months of Mia's actions, the man had enough and spoke to his boss and went over what was happening. His boss suggested he hire one of the private investigators the company uses from time to time. So, several days later the man spoke to the PI. After giving him all of Mia's information, the PI said he would be in touch when he had something to report. It took about a month, but the PI called him at work and asked him to come by his office. The PI had photographs of Mia with another man. These photographs were taken in both the city and Mia's hometown. The PI said he was sorry, that he wishes he could have given him better news, but at least he now knows where he stands. The man called a friend and asked him if he could stay there for a few days while he figured out what happens next. The next day Mia called him wanting to know where he had been last night. The man just hung up the phone and started working on his projects that day. Around 6 p.m. he left the office and was headed back to his friend's home when he noticed Mia standing next to his car. The man asked Mia where her car was. She said a friend dropped her off and she would ride home with him. The man said no. Mia reached into his wallet and handed her a 20 and said get a cab. Mia looked stunned, but the man held up his finger and said he knows about Roger. Mia just looked at him and started to cry. He got into his car and left Mia crying. About 2 days later the man returned home to find Mia had taken most of her clothes and had left. So, he decided to just stay there that night. The driver interrupted the man's thoughts to let him know they were parked in front of the building and that he would park, then get some coffee and wait for the meeting to be over. The man told the driver the meeting will take no more than an hour, handed him some cash and said go eat a good meal too. The man got out of the vehicle and entered the lobby of the building and headed toward a bank of elevators to go up to the top floor where the board would be meeting. As he did so, he was joined by several people that started to brief him on what was on the agenda for that meeting. The man told them to be quiet because he only had one item, and when it was over, he was leaving. He demanded to be left alone on the ride up. On the way, he thought about how Mia turned ugly during the divorce and attempted to paint him as the bad guy she was attempting to get away from. Then the ding of the elevator brought him back to the here and now. He exited the elevator and walked to his office, opened the door and stood and took in the view of the city he had known for years. Then opened his safe for the last time and got out some cash and a large envelope and placed both in his briefcase. Then looked around to see if there was anything he wanted from the office. Seeing nothing, he walked toward the boardroom. When he entered the room, almost everybody stood up. The chairman of the board brought the meeting to order and attempted to go to the first item on the agenda. The man stood up and said he wanted to discuss something and was leaving. He reached into his briefcase and slid his resignation as CEO across to the chairman, who looked at it in shock. The man looked around the room, making eye contact with each and every board member. The last person he looked at was the VP of sales, and he said his last act as CEO was to nominate her as his replacement. The room went silent as the man walked out of the room. This act was the last part of his promise made years before. The man also knew with his departure 75% of the company business would be lost, because so much of that business was cultivated by him and was based on him being in charge. The man then walked to the cafeteria and ordered some brunch. His mind went back to Mia. When she left him, she took everything he had. For many years the man was living in a small one-bedroom apartment. He was forced to pay Mia alimony for almost 10 years after the divorce. Lucky for him, Mia got remarried and he was finally off the hook. Then over the next 30 years the man rose up in the company and finally became the CEO several years before. As he ate, he thought about his meeting with the man that married Mia several months before they got married. That was the day he made the deal to help that man's daughter become a senior executive in his company. In return, he would seduce Mia, marry her and then dump her and return to his home in Bahrain. The plan worked to perfection. Losing his money crashed Mia's world. The man never really thought much about Mia after that. After he finished, the man spoke to the chef and told him the meal was fantastic and handed him $100 for his trouble. Then got out his phone and called his driver to come pick him up. He did, and before the driver put the car in gear, the man told him he wanted to visit Mia. The man understood and they left the city and headed toward Mia's hometown. The grounds were freshly landscaped, and the place was beautiful. They rode up the entrance road. Then the car stopped, and the man got out. He walked about 200 feet until he found himself standing at the foot of Mia's grave. He said, "Mia, a part of me will always love you. All the events that lead up to your actions that day were yours, not mine." The man reached into his pocket and took out a small rock and tossed it on the top of Mia's grave. The man walked back to the car and told the driver to take him to the airport, that he wanted to go home. As they pulled away, the man said his final, "Bye Mia."